What's up, guys? Today we're talking about risk and reward. And this is important because a lot of times if you're not managing risk properly, you could lose a lot of your investment. Some people run very high risk strategies. That's how you get a crazy amount of APR, upwards of 100 to 300% APR on blue chip pairs, but it could go badly if you don't manage your risk well. And I will share a few tips how you could basically add more return to your portfolio by taking on more risk, as well as how do you reduce that risk to make sure that you're not risking your entire portfolio. If you guys look at my current portfolio here, I have a pretty good track record when it comes to yield farming. My current open position sits at 11.28 ETH of profit. Closed positions sit at 7.7 ETH. Compared against holding, I've been able to beat impermanent loss pretty consistently here. And hopefully with these videos, I will help you guys do exactly that. Before we dive in, this is not financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor. I'm just some random guy on the internet sharing this information. So if you've been investing for a while, you would know that the risk and reward is typically tied together, especially when you're yield farming, when you guys are seeing like 100%, 300% APR. Typically, these are very high risk investments and the potential reward is higher. But the keyword here is potential reward. Just because you take on more risk doesn't mean that you would gain more reward. And an easy example of that is Bitcoin versus altcoins. Bitcoin is sitting near its all-time high, while altcoins like Ethereum, which is arguably riskier, still have a bit of room to recover from before we reach all-time high. So again, just because we're taking more risk doesn't mean that we're going to get more reward, but this generally holds true in most cases, especially in an efficient market. But in crypto, sometimes it's pretty inefficient. So there are some great investment opportunities that are lower risk that's on this top area here. And let's say we spot that investment, right? What's going to happen over time is as more and more people spot those great investments, they're going to buy into those investments as well, and the potential reward would drop to match the risk. Just like the Bitcoin example, right? The price of Bitcoin is sitting near the all-time high because a lot of institutions have been buying Bitcoin. Because of that, the potential reward has dropped by quite a lot. And sometimes our risk assessment is not going to be accurate, right? Sometimes we think the tokens we invest in are great investments, but later on we find out that it's actually a bad investment with either very low return or a negative return, a loss, right? While we're taking on a lot of risk. So when investors are in this situation for a long period of time, typically, they sell out of their positions or capitulate. And because when the prices are low, if the asset recovers, then you're going to be able to make more gains, right? So then in this scenario, the potential reward rises as well. So just a very important concept to understand when you guys are investing into crypto or other investments, as well as altcoins. There are great investments out there, but they're typically harder to find. And when people find them, they're no longer going to be great investments, right? And when you guys see a lot of people showing like 100%, 300% APR on stuff like Ethereum and USDC, for example, they're typically running very high risk strategies that are not very sustainable over a long period of time. And my current portfolio is running a medium to high risk strategy right now. If you guys look at my position, for example, Ethereum to Sol is a pretty low risk pool when it comes to altcoin investing, but stuff like Pixel to ETH. Pixel is a very small cap gaming token that I'm bullish on. You can see I'm up nicely on these pools, but again, there's still higher risk because the market cap is so small. Bonk, a little bit less risk. Arrow and AIXBT, smaller caps, so a bit more risk again. Basis for everyone, also very high risk. MOG is also a medium and high risk token. But because of that, I'm able to generate a higher return. When we compare it to one of my clients' portfolio, you can see they're in nice profit, but they're only generating a roughly 20% APR, while my portfolio is generating roughly 40 to 50% APR. And there's no right answers, right? Some people like myself prefer medium to higher risk investment, especially when the prices are cheap. I'm going to be taking on more risk. And then as the market becomes euphoric and altcoins shoot up in price, I might hop over to the lower risk strategies. But either way, if you are a low risk investor, you can't stomach a lot of risk. You don't want to be running the same pools like I am, right? You want to stick to the blue chip pools with a wider range and a more sustainable strategy. But if you're a high risk investor like myself, running the low risk strategy might not generate enough return for you, so you might want to have a higher risk strategy. And the way we manage these two portfolios are pretty different. For example, for myself, I run a pretty high risk DeFi strategy, but I use a lot of those DeFi income to dollar cost average Bitcoin, which is a lower risk asset, as well as adding to my stablecoin and traditional finance investments. So if you actually account for my whole investment portfolio, I would actually be lower on the risk curve. But let's keep this video more focused on DeFi. There are a few ways you could generate more return from yield farming. The first way is the most common. It's through squeezing the range of a particular liquidity pool. For example, I've seen a lot of people doing like a $1,500 to $2,000 USDC to ETH range, and maybe the APR they generate was very high for a short period of time, but it's actually a very high risk strategy because you miss out on a lot of the upside. And if you were to chase the range upwards like this, and then Ethereum drops back down again, you're going to be locking in a lot of impermanent loss, and you might end up with actually less money than what you started out with. I stocked a lot of portfolios in my time of yield farming, and this is exactly how a lot of DeFi yield farmers get chopped up. For example, during the last year grind here in this range, they were yield farming with tight ranges here on Ethereum and USDC. When Ethereum shot up, they chased the range, right? They rebalance there. And then when Ethereum dumps again, they're at a huge US dollar loss. They lock in that loss by rebalancing once again. And when Ethereum shoots back up again, they missed out on the gains once again. So that's one way to generate a return, right? Squeezing the range. I don't really like this strategy at all. I don't think it's that good. I've ran tight ranges in the past, and basically it was never worth it for me. But this is exactly what a lot of other people teach. And if you avoid this at all costs, your chance of actually making a profit becomes much higher. The second way that I think is a better way to boost return is to add mid and small cap pools into your portfolio. Again, if you guys see my portfolio, stuff like Ethereum and Sol is still a very solid pool to be in. With a very wide range that I have, I'm still generating over 18% APR on it. So really solid pools, but it's not going to generate crazy return that doubles your portfolio anytime soon. But if you look at like a higher risk pool that I'm currently in, like Bonk to Ethereum, for example, I'm currently generating roughly 68% APR on the current capital and a 89% yield on my cost. So much higher potential return by including some of these pools. But again, it's not all profit, right? You guys see these pools that are sitting in a loss. Hopefully we turn a profit with these, but with any strategy, it's not going to be 100%. So that's the second way. And the third way is by using leverage. For example, a leverage long strategy is lending your Ethereum, and then we're going to borrow USDC. And we use that USDC to yield farm Ethereum and USDC, for example. Those fees we generate could be used to pay back the loan, or we could add more collateral with the fees and basically lend more USDC to compound to this once again. But again, this strategy is higher risk as well because there is a liquidation risk. If Ethereum drops by quite a lot, your loan to value ratio would rise and potentially trigger a liquidation. But it is still a viable strategy to basically hop from this lower risk range into a higher risk, higher return strategy. So those are the three ways to boost your return. And I want to talk about reducing risk for just a bit. There is 3 tips that I want to give you guys that have helped me a lot. The first one is to de-risk with your fees. If you guys are taking more risk when you're yield farming. For example, for my pools, they are medium to high risk. So I'm not going to be compounding everything that I earn with these pools, right? I might only compound 25 to 50% into my pools. And then the rest, I would either hold the Ethereum or sell some of those fees into Bitcoin to diversify my portfolio. For example, with this Bonk and ETH pool, I've been using the Bonk that I collect to swap into Bitcoin to basically accumulate a bigger Bitcoin bag. That's de-risking with your fees, and diversify your portfolio just means that you want to be yield farming with at least 5 to 10 positions at a time, because if you only have 1 to 2 or 3 to 4, if all of those pairs do really badly, you're going to be at a loss much quicker. And even though altcoins most of the time move together, sometimes there will be outperformance in one token and then underperformance in others, right? As you can see here, Arrow and AIXBT is currently underperforming in terms of my entry, but maybe those pools would flip to outperformance later on, right? But the idea is I'm not putting all of my eggs in one basket. Even if one pool doesn't do well, I have other pools that are making profits to balance it out. For example, just these two pools loss alone, I have made a net profit simply by being in this Bonk and ETH pool. If I were to go all in to only these two pools, then I would be in a big loss. And because we're not rebalancing very often at all, the management is very minimal, especially if you guys have systems in place to help you manage and reinvest those fees. And lastly, we want to have a core majors position, stuff like Ethereum to Solana or Ethereum to Bitcoin. I prefer Ethereum to Solana because it was at a better entry, and I'm already dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin with my fees, so I don't mind not yield farming with Bitcoin. But having this majors pool basically allows you to have that safety net in case the smaller cap altcoins dump really hard. At least you have some capital that you're falling back to, and the larger your majors position is, the lower the risk your portfolio becomes. Squeezing the range is never worth it if you're trying to get more return. I would much rather add more mid to small cap crypto to crypto pools to boost return rather than squeezing the range. And using leverage is typically good if you are a more advanced users. If you have a bullish outlook, then this setup would be good. If you're trying to short the market, then the reverse setup would be good, where you're lending out your USDC and then borrowing Ethereum. And again, with lowering risk, these are the 3 ways that you could do it. So I hope that helps, guys. There are a lot of videos on my YouTube channel talking about yield farming, how to do it safely, how to do it sustainably, how to be a more consistent and profitable yield farmer. And that's it for today. So be sure to check those out if you want to do all of those things. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys on the next video.